She heard her name from across the marble floor, but not the way she loved it, not the way he used to whisper it at night. The laughter stung louder than any slap. Imani Sharp stood behind the thick pillar of the rooftop ballroom, her phone pressed to her chest, heartbeat louder than the string quartet nearby. Just moments earlier, she had stepped away to take a call from her aunt back home. Nothing urgent, just a, "How are you, baby?" The kind of love Imani clung to in a world that barely noticed her. But now, she was frozen. Not because of the weather, even though the rooftop breeze swept through her fitted navy dress like a chill from her old life, but because she heard him. Dorian Blake, the man she was set to marry. The man she moved to New York for. The man who, moments ago, smiled stiffly and let a table of polished VCs mock her like she was an unpaid intern chasing dreams on Craigslist. "She's on sabbatical," he said, when asked why his fiancée still didn't have a job. From not having a career path yet, they laughed. So did he. She didn't. Imani Sharp wasn't supposed to be anyone special. That's what the world told girls like her. She grew up on the quiet side of Somerville, raised by Aunt Letha after her mother passed when she was 7. Her childhood smelled like books, biscuits, and old furniture polish. Her safe world held together by gospel music and dog-eared novels from her aunt's second-hand bookstore, Letha's Reads and Remedies. There were no fancy trips, no silver spoons, but there was warmth, real warmth. The kind you carry in your bones when everything else is cold. After college, she stayed close, helped with the shop, took bookkeeping gigs, sent out resumes when she could, always hoping someone in a big city would see something more in her than local girl, clean resume. Then came the call. A college friend, Bryn, now working for a major marketing agency in New York, had 2 tickets to an exclusive tech gala. "Come up for the weekend. Wear that dress you wore to my cousin's wedding. You never know who you'll meet." She had no expectations, just a single suitcase, a pair of heels from a Marshall's clearance rack, and a tired heart that hadn't known affection in a while. He walked into the gala like he owned the night, because technically he did. Dorian Blake was New York tech royalty. Not flashy, just precise. His suit, navy blue Tom Ford. His cufflinks, silver initials. His stride, intentional. And his eyes, when they first landed on Imani across the open bar, slowed for the first time that night. "You don't look like you want to be here," he said after offering her a glass of champagne. "I don't," she answered, "but the appetizers are good." He laughed, genuinely, and introduced himself. She knew who he was. She had read about him, the Blake Investments firm, the recent $50 million AI acquisition, the childhood in Connecticut private schools, but she didn't care to perform for him. She didn't drop buzzwords, didn't fake knowing blockchain, didn't ask what car he drove. That's what got him. In a room full of polish and pretenders, Imani stood real. They spent 2 hours talking about things that didn't belong in a tech gala. Her aunt's obsession with Toni Morrison. His fear of failing his late father's legacy. Her dream to publish voices from communities like hers. His secret dream to write a children's book. Just one, someday. She wasn't trying to impress, and that's why she did. He asked her to dinner the next night, then again 2 nights later. By the end of the week, she returned to South Carolina with a text that said, "You left, but I don't think I can stop thinking about you." What followed was 3 months of slow but steady courtship. Long video calls, morning check-ins, weekend flights, good conversation, better silences. When he asked her to be his fiancée, it wasn't with a big flash. No helicopter proposal, no ring stuffed in dessert. He simply flew down, walked into the bookstore on a Thursday morning, handed Aunt Letha a bouquet, and turned to Imani with the quietest confidence she had ever seen in a man. "I don't want you to fix me. I just want you near me. Will you marry me?" She nodded. The ring wasn't huge, but her yes was. Imani moved to New York 2 weeks later. She turned down a stable job offer at a publishing firm back home to be closer to Dorian. He told her he'd support her until she found something here. "I've got you," he said. But after 3 weeks of job searching, then 5, then 8, things shifted. Dorian stopped asking about her applications. He stopped noticing how hard she was trying. He became colder, and she became invisible. That's how we got here. To a rooftop in Manhattan. To a man trying to laugh off her struggle. To a woman watching the love of her life call her jobless, as if ambition without income meant nothing. She placed her phone back in her purse and walked away. Not from the party. Him, from the man who only saw value in her when others did too. That night, she packed her things and booked a one-way flight home. He didn't call, and even if he had, she wasn't picking up. The sun had just started to rise when Imani landed in Charleston. The air was warm and heavy with pine. She didn't wait for a car service. She rented a compact, loaded her suitcase into the trunk, and drove the familiar road home. The silence in the car was louder than any heartbreak. She didn't cry. She didn't play sad songs. She didn't call her aunt to vent. Instead, she watched the trees blur past and forced herself to breathe. When she pulled into the gravel driveway, Aunt Letha was already outside in her robe, barefoot, holding a steaming mug, like she'd known the moment was coming. "Baby," she said, opening her arms. Imani didn't hesitate. She dropped everything and buried herself in the hug that raised her. The hug that never asked for explanations. They didn't speak about Dorian that day. Imani spent the morning reorganizing shelves in the bookstore, restocking the bestsellers table, and cleaning out the storeroom. She made herself useful, not to distract herself, but because this was what always centered her. Later that evening, over cornbread and black-eyed peas, Aunt Letha finally asked gently, "You done, or you just tired?" Imani stared at her plate. "I'm done." Letha nodded once, then sipped her tea. "No judgment, no sermon, then make sure you stay done. Don't let that pain circle back around dressed as closure." For 2 weeks, Imani barely touched her phone. She logged out of social media, blocked Dorian's number, not out of spite, but because she needed the space to remember who she was without his voice in her head. She journaled, took long walks, helped customers at the store, read books on entrepreneurship, branding, digital marketing, cooked every evening. And every night she asked herself the same question: what do I want that no one can take from me? The answer always came back the same. Something that's mine. The bookstore had always been more than a place of business. It was a sanctuary, especially for women in the neighborhood who wanted to read, about people who looked like them, sounded like them, struggled like them. But Aunt Letha had no online presence, no website, no e-commerce setup, no digital catalog, no SEO. And one afternoon, while stacking a box of donated titles, it hit Imani like a wave. What if I built a platform for stories like ours? She wasn't thinking small, not a blog, not a fan page. A platform. A digital publishing space dedicated to underrepresented voices. Black. Authors, immigrant stories, working-class narratives, Southern writers. Stories that never got past the velvet ropes of traditional publishing. She stayed up late that night sketching out her first wireframe on paper. No fancy software. Just a notebook, a pen, and years of ideas stored in her soul. She didn't wait for investors. Didn't pitch friends for funds. Didn't call Dorian. She got a side job tutoring high school students in math to save up. Borrowed a laptop from a cousin. Used YouTube and free coding forums to figure out how to build her MVP. She named it Shelf Worthy, because every story deserved shelf space, even digital ones. Her goal was small at first. With 5 authors, you release 3 free titles. B. Build traffic through Instagram. I offer subscription models later. But the more she worked, the more she realized she wasn't just building a website. She was building her worth in public. The pushback. People questioned her. How will you make money? You think folks really want to read all that heavy stuff? Why not get a regular job and work on this later? She nodded politely, smiled, then went back to work. The bookstore's back room became her unofficial office. She bought a used desk and placed it near the old heater. Aunt Letha brought her ginger tea every night and never asked her to explain the wireframes taped to the wall. Imani worked 12-hour days. Some days she got 5 hours of sleep. Some days she cried in the shower. Some nights she missed Dorian. But she never went back. Not once. She launched the beta version. It crashed twice. The payment processor bugged out on day 3. An author ghosted. But on day 7, a freelance journalist wrote a short piece titled, "This Black Woman Built a Digital Bookstore from a Storage Room. And It's Winning." That changed everything. Within a week, she had 10,000 site visitors, 1,000 downloads, her inbox flooded with authors asking to collaborate. She adjusted, upgraded, added servers, and kept going. Imani didn't wear blazers anymore. She wore hoodies and jeans, hair in a bun, glasses crooked on her nose, the look of someone building something real. By the 9th month, Shelfworthy had over 75,000 monthly readers. She hired 3 remote staffers, started a podcast, launched a mobile app in beta, secured a brand partnership with a regional chain of indie bookstores, was invited to speak at a tech summit in Raleigh, and then, in month 14, she received her first profile feature in Southern Visionaries, a glossy lifestyle magazine highlighting changemakers across the South. On the cover, Imani Sharp, the woman who wrote her way back. She was in her office late one Thursday, eating takeout and editing podcast transcripts when her assistant buzzed her line. "Imani, you have a visitor." She glanced at the clock. 8:43 p.m. "I didn't schedule any meetings today. He said his name is Dorian Blake." Imani's chest tightened, not because she still loved him, but because she wasn't sure if she'd ever forgiven herself for loving someone who needed public approval to value her. She stood slowly, smoothed her sweatshirt, and walked to the door. Dorian Blake stared at his reflection in the tinted glass of his office window. The skyline glimmered behind him, but he wasn't looking at the view. He was trying to figure out when exactly everything started slipping. Blake Ventures had always been the crown jewel in his life. Sleek, calculated, relentless. Just like him, he had scaled quickly, jumping from mid-sized deals to 7-figure acquisitions within 3 years of launching. The media called him the Precision King. Clients trusted his name more than they trusted their own instinct. But behind that name was a man afraid to lose control. He had always been that way. As a child, failure wasn't allowed. His father had drilled that in with icy eyes and stone silences. Mistakes were weakness. Weakness was shame. And shame in their house wasn't forgiven. So Dorian grew up learning to win. At chess, at debates, at investment games, at networking. He built walls with achievements, piled titles over insecurities, chose control over closeness. And then Imani happened. She wasn't planned, wasn't part of any future partner checklist. She didn't come from money, didn't walk like someone trying to impress, but her presence, disarming. Her stillness, comforting. Her voice, not loud but grounding. He had been intrigued by her calm, the way she could walk into a room and not shrink, but not need to shine either. At first, he liked that she wasn't like the others. She didn't fawn over his money or status. She didn't ask questions to get favors. She was smart, observant, and soft. But over time, that same softness started to feel like a mirror he didn't want to face. He saw her struggling to find work after she moved in, but instead of offering solutions or listening, he judged her in silence. Every time a friend asked what she was doing, he felt a knot in his stomach. Not because of her, but because of how it made him look. That brunch, it wasn't meant to humiliate her. But when the comment about her being jobless came up, he laughed. Not because it was funny, but because he didn't know how to defend her without explaining her. He thought the joke would pass. But she had heard, and she left, just like that. No shouting match, no breakdown, no chase. She simply walked away, like someone who knew her value didn't need to be argued. He hadn't called. He didn't know what to say. Apologies felt cheap when trust had been broken so cleanly. So he worked, buried himself deeper in projects, attended every pitch, expanded the firm's AI division, partnered with international markets. He climbed higher until everything broke at once. Their flagship AI product underperformed during rollout. Their lead investor pulled out overnight. The CTO resigned after a data privacy leak, and the press got wind of it. Then the lawsuit started. Discreet, quiet, but powerful enough to scare the board. They voted to remove him as CEO. He didn't fight it. Because somewhere deep inside, he knew this wasn't just about code or contracts. It was about the rot underneath. His leadership had been built on ego, not people. The night he cleared out his office, he found her old note in the drawer, the one she'd left him a week before their engagement, back when things still felt like hope. If all this ever disappears, I hope you'll still know who you are. And I hope, by then, you'll finally let someone love that man. He folded it and put it in his wallet. He didn't try to contact her for months. He needed to sit with himself first. Strip the pride. Learn how to be useful, not just powerful. He volunteered at a startup incubator in Brooklyn, offering free mentorship to young founders. Did freelance strategy sessions for non-profits. Not because he needed money, he still had savings, but because he wanted to remember how to serve. When he first saw her article in Southern Visionaries, he read it 3 times. She looked different. Not polished in a way that said new money, but steady, rooted, like someone who didn't need anyone to validate her anymore. And he knew. He owed her more than an apology. He owed her his presence, not as a man trying to win her back, but as a man who finally saw her. So he shaved, got on a plane, booked a hotel in Raleigh, and sat in the hallway of her building for over an hour before he asked the front desk to call up. When she opened the office door that night, she didn't look surprised. She looked like she had been expecting him, eventually. "Your place is impressive," he said, stepping in. She didn't reply. "I lost everything, and I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I'm here because I need a job, any job, strategy, research, cleaning the floor, whatever lets me earn what I never gave you." She studied him, not out of bitterness, but curiosity. He was tired, but softer, less armor, more man. "This is the part where I gloat, right?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. "No, this is the part where I finally admit I was wrong. About you, about everything." She nodded once, then walked past him and sat behind her desk. She didn't fire questions, didn't dismiss him. She opened a file, took out a blank sheet, and handed him a pen. "Let's start with who you are now." He took it, this time with no pride in the way. Dorian filled out the sheet slowly, careful with each word. For once, he wasn't listing roles or accomplishments. There was no title to hide behind. No impressive job description to deflect the truth. Name: Dorian Blake, previous role, founder, Blake Ventures, current focus, rebuilding, with purpose, strengths, strategy, brand positioning, learning how to listen, weaknesses, ego, short-sightedness, unlearning what I thought made a man successful. He slid the paper across her desk. Imani didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. She read it in silence, then folded it neatly and placed it beside her keyboard. "I'm not hiring right now," she said simply. "At least, not in your lane." He nodded. "I understand, but I'll keep this. If something opens up, I'll reach out." It wasn't a no, but it wasn't a yes either. Dorian stood, unsure of whether to offer a handshake or leave quietly. She made the choice for him. "Good night, Dorian." He opened the door and paused. "I know sorry isn't enough, but I am. Sorry, I mean..." She didn't respond. He didn't expect her to. Over the next few weeks, he didn't contact her again. He returned to Brooklyn, kept volunteering, kept consulting. His name didn't hold weight like before, but the small startups respected his work ethic. One even invited him to be an advisor. He said no. He didn't want another title until he could carry it without arrogance. Imani followed him quietly. She saw the news about his removal from Blake Ventures, but what caught her attention wasn't the headline. It was the photo. He wasn't in a suit, no smirk, just a plain black hoodie, standing outside a community tech hub with a group of black teenage coders, holding a whiteboard marker and smiling like a man who wasn't faking peace anymore. She clicked out of the tab, didn't save it, didn't send it to anyone, but something inside her shifted. One Friday night she was invited to a networking dinner in Atlanta, a mix of black women entrepreneurs, publishers, and tech innovators. The energy in the room was powerful, not loud, but purposeful. Midway through the dinner, a speaker took the mic. "We want to shout out someone who helped 5 of our founders organize their pitch decks, refine their messaging, and secure real funding this quarter. And he never asked for a single feature credit." A few heads turned, and there he was, seated quietly at the back, not with the guests of honor, but near the staff. Dorian. Imani blinked. For a second, she wasn't sure if she wanted to get up and walk out, or walk over. She didn't do either. She watched. When the dinner ended, he didn't approach her. He smiled politely, gave her space, then left. And that's when she knew. He wasn't trying to win her back. He was becoming someone worth standing beside, even if she never stood there again. 2 weeks later, she sent him an article, a small blog piece about one of her authors going viral for a coming-of-age story set in a southern refugee community. He replied with a single line, "It's beautiful work. I'm proud of what you're building." She didn't reply right away, but she didn't block him either. They traded links occasionally after that. No flirting, no expectation, just mutual respect, exchanged quietly through the digital space that once held all their early flirting. Another month passed. Then came the Tech Founders Summit in Charlotte. Imani was one of the keynote speakers. Her topic, silent power, building without noise. The room was packed. Mostly women, mostly underdogs, mostly tired of being underestimated. She delivered her speech with calm fire, talked about what it meant to build from scraps, to bet on yourself without applause, to walk away from people who only loved the polished version of you. When she finished, the applause was steady, not explosive, but solid. She stepped off stage and headed backstage, where her assistant handed her a water bottle and whispered, "Someone left this for you." A card, no name on the front. Inside, a line she recognized instantly. "If all this ever disappears, I hope you'll still know who you are." She looked up. Through the crowd near the exit, he stood, dressed simply, no entourage, no photographers. Just a man. Still in love, still quiet, still not chasing. This time, she walked toward him. "Dinner?" she asked. He smiled. "Only if you let me pay." Have you ever watched someone become the version of themselves you always believed they could be after you walked away? Tell us in the comments. Your story could inspire someone who's healing too. And if this chapter moved you, like and subscribe for more powerful love and life stories. Dinner wasn't extravagant. It was a tucked-away bistro on a quiet block in Charlotte, with dim lighting and the scent of rosemary in the air. No cameras, no staged moments, just 2 people sitting across from each other, this time without titles, tension, or ticking clocks. Imani didn't wear anything special, a dark green wrap dress, low heels, and a coat she'd bought back in South Carolina. The same one Dorian had once said made her look too casual for the city. He didn't comment on it this time. He wore a simple grey sweater and slacks. His watch was gone. No ring, no heavy scent of cologne. He looked like someone trying to be present, not impressive. They ordered roasted chicken, garlic potatoes, and wine. Talked about safe things at first, new restaurants, book titles, rising rent prices. The rhythm was unfamiliar, not flirty, not forced, just cautious. Eventually, the conversation deepened. "I read about the young author on your platform," he said. "The one who wrote that memoir about losing her brother. You gave her a home for her story. That's rare." Imani nodded. She wrote it in pieces. Each chapter came from a different city she passed through after his death. Dorian took a slow sip of water. "That's heavy." She didn't want it edited too much. Said the pain needed to breathe. They paused. Then he asked, "Do you remember what you told me back when I first took you to my office?" She looked at him, unsure. He smiled faintly. "One day I'm going to build a table where all the stories that don't get invited can sit." Imani blinked, then leaned back. She hadn't remembered saying that, but it sounded like her. "I didn't believe you then," he added softly. "I thought you were idealistic, sweet, but soft, like most people who say they want to change things. But now? Now I know you build tables, not because you want to prove anything, but because you've always known some people never even had a seat." She looked away, throat tight. Praise was dangerous. It softened defenses. After dinner, they stepped outside. The night was cool, quiet. No rush to say goodbye. "I can walk you to your car," he offered. She hesitated, then nodded. "It's around the corner." They walked side by side, not touching, but close enough to remember. "I saw your interview last month," she said. "With the college podcast?" "Yeah. You said you learned more in the past year from listening than you did from leading." He chuckled lightly. "They edited out the part where I admitted I was an awful fiancée." Imani didn't laugh, but her expression softened. "I don't need an edited version of you, Dorian. I never did." He stopped walking. She turned. "I know," he said. "I'm just finally learning how to show up as that version. The one that listens. That doesn't interrupt. That doesn't need to shine." A beat passed. She stepped closer. "I'm not asking for anything. I know. But I need to be clear about one thing." "Say it." She breathed in. "If this goes anywhere, and I'm not saying it will, it can't be built on pity, or nostalgia, or regret. I won't carry your guilt. I've already done that once." He nodded slowly. "No guilt," he said. "Only intention." They stood in silence. Streetlights hummed overhead. A couple laughed nearby. Somewhere, someone's car alarm chirped once and went quiet. Imani reached for her keys. "I should go." Dorian didn't ask for a hug, didn't try to hold her hand. He opened the car door for her, stepped back and said, "I don't know what I'm hoping for, but I know I'd rather rebuild something honest with you than pretend anything else matters." She paused, met his eyes. "I'm not promising anything. I'm not asking you to." She got in. He closed the door gently, and for the first time since everything fell apart, she drove away with her chest light, not tight. Imani didn't call him the next day. She didn't text either. But she kept thinking about that dinner, not because of the food or the conversation, but because of how different it felt from their past. There was no pretending, no posturing, no attempt to prove anything. Dorian hadn't tried to charm her. He had simply been there. And that felt heavier than flowers or apologies. She returned to work that Monday with a sharper focus. Her team was expanding again. New interns had come in from local HBCUs, and her Raleigh office had just finalized a 6-book publishing deal with a small press in Detroit. Her calendar was packed. Morning meetings, late-night podcast edits, back-to-back interviews with radio hosts and book bloggers. But beneath all the noise was a quiet hum of something she didn't want to name yet. Hope, not for him, not entirely, but for what it meant that someone who once bruised her pride had taken the long road to humility. Still, she wasn't ready to hand him anything. Not trust, not friendship, not opportunity. She needed to know this wasn't a moment. She needed to see consistency. Dorian, on his end, made no assumptions. He didn't follow up with flirty texts, didn't send gifts, didn't try to squeeze into her schedule. He simply sent her a single message 2 weeks later. A founder I mentor wants to launch a reading app for teens. Would you be open to a call? You'd be paid for consulting. Imani stared at the message. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't sentimental. It was business, respectful, professional, and clear. She replied, "Send the brief." The call happened that Thursday. She joined from her office. Camera on. No makeup. Hair pulled back. Notebook open. The founder was a young Latina from Austin, passionate, organized, and clear about her mission to improve reading scores among bilingual teens using serialized fiction in both Spanish and English. Dorian barely spoke. He let the founder lead. Let Imani guide. Only chimed in when necessary. The call lasted 47 minutes. After the founder signed off, Imani stayed on for a second. "You didn't talk much," she said. "I wasn't the smartest person in the room." She smiled. "Barely. You never used to admit that. I used to think power meant knowing everything. Now I know it's about knowing when to step aside." She paused. "You're still learning, huh?" "Every day." She nodded. "Keep going." Then she ended the call. No talk soon. No extra words. That night, she sat on her balcony with her laptop on her knees and a cup of ginger tea in her hands. She opened a blank document, typed his name, then deleted it. Then typed again, "The man who once broke me showed up today as someone worth listening to." She didn't save the file, but she didn't close the laptop either. Meanwhile, Dorian returned to his routines, mentoring, reading, walking more than driving, taking notes from books instead of skimming for quotes. He found joy in simple things, editing someone else's deck, designing a better feedback loop, connecting creators to editors. For the first time in years, he was using his skill without using his name. His phone stayed quiet, and he didn't mind, because now he knew how loud ego had been in his life. A month later, their paths crossed again, not through planning, but by orbit. An author from Shelfworthy was invited to speak at a literacy fundraiser, hosted by one of the incubators Dorian consulted for. Imani arrived alone, wearing a navy suit and sneakers, her usual "I'm not here to impress you" look. He was already in the audience, clapping when the young author finished her story. They locked eyes for a second, no smile, just mutual acknowledgement. Later, at the back table, he poured himself water from a shared pitcher. "You came," he said without turning. "Of course. She's one of ours. You should be proud." "I am." He glanced sideways. "I didn't know you'd be here." She smirked. "Didn't expect me to be in rooms like this?" "No. I just know you don't like the fluff." She nodded. "But I like watching stories win." He offered her the second glass of water. She took it, and they stood there, quiet, sharing space again. 3 days later, he received an email from her office. Subject, partnership proposal, shelf-worthy. Ex-Impact Advisory Body. "We're developing a project for underserved high school creatives. It'll require external strategic support. Let us know if you're available to discuss." IS. It wasn't a job offer. It wasn't a lifeline. It was something better. An opportunity to earn presence again, not just through love, but through purpose. And Dorian? He clicked reply without hesitation. The meeting was scheduled for Tuesday at 10 a.m. Sharp. Dorian arrived early, 15 minutes to be exact. He didn't sit in the waiting area. He stood near the bookshelf wall in Imani's downtown Raleigh office, scanning the spines. There were titles by Black poets, memoirs from immigrant entrepreneurs, and fiction written in both English and Spanish. It wasn't curated for aesthetics. It was curated for truth. He turned when he heard footsteps. Imani walked in, tablet in hand, already mid-sentence with her assistant. "Make sure legal reviews the mentor agreement before noon," she said. Her voice was clear, Her posture relaxed. She didn't flinch when she saw him. "Conference rooms this way," she said simply. He followed without comment. Inside, the long wooden table was already set with folders, tablets, and coffee. She sat at the head. He didn't mind taking the side seat. The project was titled The Writers' Table, an initiative targeting creative teens in Title I schools. The goal was to give students access to storytelling workshops, publication, opportunities, and a chance to build their own digital anthologies. Imani led the discussion. "We're piloting this in 3 schools to start," she explained. "Each location needs a strategic partner to oversee program structure, community engagement, and funding alignment." Dorian nodded, reading through the deck she passed him. "This is tight. How'd you get the district on board?" "By showing them our retention model. And being patient." He chuckled. "Never your strong suit." She raised a brow. "You're mistaking patience for silence. 2 different things." He smiled. She didn't. The air wasn't tense, just firm. She wasn't here to impress him. She was here to work. After an hour of back and forth, logistics, impact metrics, and budget forecasts, she finally leaned back. "So, are you in?" He didn't hesitate. "Absolutely. Good, because I don't need a face. I need a function. I got you." She held his gaze. "No missteps. I'm not here to perform. I'm here to serve." She nodded, closed her tablet. Meeting over. Over the next 4 weeks, they worked in sync. Emails turned to weekly check-ins. Zoom calls turned to on-site visits. Strategy meetings ran longer than planned, not because of flirting, but because of efficiency. They built well together, and that part felt familiar. Once, early in their relationship, Dorian had said, "You're not a mirror, you're a map. You help me figure out where I'm going." Now, for the first time, he felt worthy of saying that again, and meaning it. One afternoon, while reviewing vendor pitches for the Charlotte School, they sat in her office eating lunch over project files. "You ever think about that brunch?" she asked suddenly. He looked up, caught off guard. "Every day. I don't mean the embarrassment. I mean the choice." He leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "You chose pride. You could have defended me, or said nothing. But you chose to mock me." "I was scared," he admitted. "Of what? Looking like a man in love with someone figuring life out?" "No, looking like a man who didn't have control over every part of his life." She studied him quietly. He went on, "I've spent most of my life managing perception. In that moment, I wasn't thinking about you. I was thinking about how weak I looked. And now? I've learned that strength isn't looking polished. It's showing up messy. It's standing beside someone even when others don't clap." Imani nodded. "I lost you because I needed you to be perfect, when you were already enough." She sat with that, then returned to the document in front of her. "We're presenting this draft to the board Monday," she said, changing the subject. He didn't press. That night, as he walked back to his car, he saw her standing by the entrance, scrolling her phone. She looked up. "You were afraid of not having control," she said. He stopped. "Yeah, well, I was afraid of being invisible." Again, his chest tightened. "Imani," she cut him off with a raised hand. "You don't get to answer that. I'm not sharing it for closure. I'm sharing it because we can't rebuild anything, not even a project, without knowing what broke." He nodded once. "Thank you," he said, and she turned and went back inside. The Monday board presentation was a quiet success. 3 out of 5 district reps voted in favor of expansion. 2 asked for additional data. Nothing was lost. Everything was progress. After the meeting, Imani stayed behind to finalize notes while Dorian gathered the extra folders and water bottles. He moved around the room with ease, no longer trying to lead, just support. "You're good at reading the room," she said suddenly. He looked up. "Took me long enough." She almost smiled. Almost. They left together, walking down the hallway of the education building toward the parking lot. "It's weird," she said, "standing next to you now and not feeling small." He stopped walking. Did I make you feel small? Not directly, but your silence did. He nodded. That silence was fear. I hid in it, because I thought relationships only worked when I was impressive. You ever think about why that was the case? Because my father loved perfection more than people, and I didn't want to repeat his story, so I built my own, and still ended up with his silence. They stood at the edge of the lot. A breeze passed. I see you now, he said. No, you're seeing me differently. I mean it. She met his eyes. Then keep seeing me, not just when I'm winning, but when I'm tired, when I'm not on, when I don't have a comeback. I'm learning how. You're learning now, she corrected. Don't confuse practice with mastery. He chuckled softly. Got it. They stood for a moment longer. Then she said, I'm not inviting you back into my life. I'm just not locking you out either. That's more than I deserve. Don't say that. Deserve doesn't build anything. Work does. Over the next few weeks, the rhythm continued. They visited the pilot schools together, sat in classrooms, met with teachers, listened to students read raw, brilliant, unfinished stories about grief, identity, love, survival. Imani thrived in those rooms. She wasn't a CEO there. She was a listener, a champion, a mirror. And Dorian? He admired that, not from afar, but from the side where respect lives. One day, in the car ride back from Charlotte, Imani fell asleep mid-conversation, her head resting slightly against the window, arms crossed. He didn't wake her. He lowered the radio, drove slower, turned down the AC, and in that quiet moment, he realized something. The woman who once waited for his validation now didn't need it. And that made him want to earn her more than ever. Later that night, she texted him, Thanks for driving. Sorry I knocked out. He replied, You were safe. That's all that mattered. Days blurred into weeks. The writers' table gained traction. Press inquiries trickled in. A new round of funding landed. One morning, Imani called an emergency staff meeting. Dorian arrived to find her pacing in front of the conference table, phone in hand. We've been invited to present at the National Equity and Literacy Forum next month. The room buzzed. That's huge, someone said. It's also in DC, she added, and they want someone from strategy to co-present. Eyes turned to Dorian. Imani didn't look at him. This needs to be about students, not us. He nodded. Then we build it right, he said. And we keep the focus where it belongs. She finally glanced at him. I'll email the brief this evening. That night, he waited for the email. It didn't come. Instead, she called. I'm scared, she said, without hello. Of what? Of looking beside me on that stage and forgetting how much it used to hurt. He breathed out slowly. I'll step back if you need me to. I don't want you to step back. Then what do you want? To not have to guess who you'll be in the moment. You won't have to. Silence. I'll be there, he said, fully, quietly. And if you need space, I'll hold it. She didn't say thank you, but he didn't need her to, because for the first time, they weren't rewriting the past. They were writing something new. The ballroom in Washington, D.C. was polished and echoing. Tall ceilings, crystal chandeliers, folded programs on every seat with a gold crest that read National Equity and Literacy Forum, celebrating voices that shape change. Imani stood behind the curtain backstage, one hand gripping her flashcard, notes, the other lightly resting on the seam of her blazer. Her breath was calm, measured, but her chest felt tighter than usual. She'd spoken at summits before, bigger ones, but this wasn't about size. This one was about memory, about what it meant to walk beside someone who once made her feel invisible and now had to be visible, not as her partner, but as her proof that growth could be real. Dorian stood on the opposite side of the curtain, waiting for his cue. He didn't rehearse. He didn't ask for a walkthrough. He had only one job today, support. No shine, no pivot, no dominance. Just presence. 5 minutes, the stage manager said. Imani adjusted her mic, ran her fingers across the hem of her jacket, and then did the one thing she hadn't let herself do all morning. She looked at him. He wasn't looking at her. He was reading the program, mouthing a sentence to himself, the way he used to do when preparing for investor panels. Except this wasn't his stage. This was hers. And he knew it. When he looked up, he nodded. She nodded back. Their session began with a soft spotlight. Today's presentation, the moderator said, is from one of the fastest-growing digital literacy initiatives in the South, shelf-worthy, and their new flagship program, the Writers' Table. Applause rose politely. Imani stepped forward first, taking center stage with the calm of someone who had earned every second of silence in that room. She started with a story about her childhood in a quiet southern town, about the bookstore, about reading books where the characters never looked like her, but imagining they did anyway. Then she spoke about the students. Some of them have never seen their name on paper outside of attendance sheets. Now, they write it on their own covers. The audience leaned in. She showed slides, testimonials, a student's drawing of their first book idea, scanned and projected behind her. It wasn't dramatic. It was raw. Then she paused and turned slightly. Now, I'll introduce the strategist who helped us take this from vision to blueprint. Dorian stepped forward. No applause, just attention. He didn't clear his throat or crack a joke. He simply said, "When I met Imani Sharp, I had everything a resume could hold. What I didn't have was the humility to serve something bigger than myself." The room stilled. She reminded me that titles don't lead change. People do, especially people who know what it means to be underestimated. He walked them through the logistics, funding structure, community stakeholder alignment, outcomes without filler. When he finished, he stepped back. Imani closed. "We don't want to rescue students. We want to remind them they've always been authors. They just didn't know where to submit their story." The room stood when she finished. Not for him, for her. And that was how it should be. Backstage, she sat on a folding chair, pulling off her heels. He approached with a bottle of water and nothing else. "I didn't make it about me," he said gently. She glanced up. "I know. I meant it. All of it." She wiped the corner of her eye with a tissue, then smiled. Tired, but proud. "You stood beside me. Not in front. I learned." She nodded once, then offered the seat beside her. He sat. Their shoulders didn't touch, but something deeper did, something they didn't have to speak about yet. Not love, not a label, but maybe a beginning, without pretense. The hotel bar that evening was quiet, dimly lit and half empty, the kind of place where people whispered instead of laughed, where glasses clinked gently instead of being slammed down. Imani sat across from Dorian in a booth tucked near the back, a half-empty, espresso in front of her and untouched dessert sitting between them. She wasn't tired from the speech. She was tired from what it stirred, not in the room, in her. "You did well today," she said without looking at him. "Thanks." She traced the rim of her cup with one finger. "I meant it. I know." He didn't press for more. That was new. He used to live for validation, fish for compliments. Now, he let moments breathe. "That room," she said, "was the one I used to imagine being in when I sat in the bookstore counting coins in a jar." He nodded slowly. "And today, you owned it." "No." She looked at him. "Today, I deserved it. There's a difference." He held her gaze. "Yes, there is." They sat in that quiet for a while. No tension, no urgency. Just two people learning how to be still in the same space. Later that night, as she unlocked the door to her suite, she heard his footsteps pause behind her. He didn't ask to come in, didn't linger, just said, "Good night, Imani." She turned slightly. "Good night, Dorian." And then she closed the door. Alone. Because some nights need to stay that way. The next morning they flew back to Raleigh on the same flight. Different rows, no fanfare. At baggage claim, he waited with her, hands in his coat pocket. You got anything lined up for the rest of the week? A site visit Wednesday. Podcast taping Friday. He nodded. You still record in-house? We upgraded. 2-room setup. Audio team comes in twice a month now. He smiled. You built something. I built peace, she corrected. Success just followed. He respected that. Respected her. Respected the version of her he never took time to understand when he had the chance. Now he was learning, day by day, that what he once called soft was strength, and what he once labeled jobless was vision in motion. That weekend, she called. No reason, no schedule. Hey, she said. I'm cooking tonight, nothing fancy. You around? There was a beat. Then, I'll bring dessert. He arrived with a paper bag from a local bakery and no expectations. Her apartment smelled like garlic and sweet peppers, no makeup, oversized tea, music low in the background. He stood in the doorway for a second longer than necessary. She noticed, but didn't comment. You like red sauce or white? She asked from the stove. Surprise me. She raised an eyebrow. That's new. I'm learning to let people lead. She handed him a spoon. Then stir. They moved around the kitchen like muscle memory. Not romantic yet, but real. When they sat down to eat, she poured water instead of wine. He didn't ask why, and she didn't offer an explanation. Some boundaries are silent and sacred. Halfway through dinner, he said, Do you miss me? She looked up slowly. I miss who I believed you could be. He nodded. Is that who I am now? I don't know yet. She stabbed her fork into a tomato. But you're no longer who I had to leave. He leaned back, exhaled. That means something. It does, she said. But I don't owe you everything just because you changed. I'm not here to collect. I'm here to continue. That made her pause. He didn't push. He just finished his food, washed his plate, and left quietly, with a thank you. No hug, no kiss. Just progress. It started with flowers, not a giant bouquet. No dramatic gesture, just a modest glass vase delivered to her office on a Tuesday morning with 3 things inside: yellow tulips, a single sunflower, and a handwritten note. Congratulations on the student publishing launch. I know this means more to you than a press release ever could. Imani stared at the card for longer than she expected. She didn't smile. But her hand lingered on the corner of the paper, as if trying to trace the weight of thought behind his words. The student-published stories, printed and bound by Shelfworthy's newest imprint, had just gone out to the first 5 schools. 100 copies each, fully funded. Student authors listed on the copyright pages. It was the first time she'd cried at work. Not in front of her staff, not in public, in her car, alone. After handing one of the books to a student who clutched it like it was made of gold. And Dorian knew. He didn't text her about it. He didn't try to show up. He just sent flowers, the quiet kind, the ones that said, I see what you're building, and I respect it. 3 days later, she invited him to the monthly team dinner. They met once a month, usually at a rotating list of cozy black-owned restaurants. No press. Just team bonding and honest laughter over fried green tomatoes, oxtail stew, or plantain flatbread. This time, it was at the juniper table, a rustic spot with dim lighting and reclaimed wood walls. He walked in wearing a navy turtleneck and dark slacks. No watch, no tie, no need to lead. Her team was surprised but respectful. A few newer interns exchanged glances. Everyone knew the history, but no one said anything direct. Imani introduced him only once. This is Dorian. He's been helping us with strategy on the writer's table. And that was that. He didn't dominate the conversation. He didn't talk over anyone. He laughed at their inside jokes, asked follow-up questions when someone mentioned a school initiative, and even offered to split the bill without hesitation. When dessert came, someone asked, "What was your favorite childhood book?" Around the table, answers ranged from Where the Sidewalk Ends to Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. When it reached Dorian, he paused. Honestly, it was the FedEx brochure catalog that used to come to my dad's office. Laughter broke out. No, seriously, he said, grinning. It wasn't about the stuff in it. I was just fascinated by the layouts, how something ordinary could be made to look important by the way it was presented. I think that's what started my obsession with packaging ideas. Imani watched him as he spoke, not because she doubted him, but because this was the version she'd always hoped existed. Someone who could be smart without being arrogant, insightful without being cold. Later, outside the restaurant, he held the door for her. She stepped out into the cool night air and didn't walk away immediately. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For showing up. And not performing." He met her eyes. "I don't need to perform. Not here. Not with you." There was a long pause. Then she said, "Walk with me." They didn't go far. Just down the block, around the corner, to a park bench nestled beneath a quiet tree. The city buzzed in the distance, but this street was mostly residential. Streetlights cast a faint yellow glow over the sidewalk. They sat. She pulled her coat tighter. He offered his, but she shook her head. "I'm okay. I used to want everything to be big," he said after a while. "Grand gestures, fancy proof that I was important. I know. But the more I lost, the more I realized the power of small things." She glanced at him. "Like flowers? Like consistency?" That made her quiet. He looked ahead. "Do you remember the week you moved to New York? I remember everything about that week. You were worried about your resume gaps. I told you I'd help fix it. But I never did. You didn't have to fix it. I know that now. But back then, I thought love meant solving people, not standing with them." She looked down at her hands. "Back then, I thought love meant proving I was worthy. Not just existing." They sat in that truth together. No shame, no tears, just ownership. He shifted slightly. "Can I say something?" "Sure. I miss you." She didn't respond right away. Then she asked, "What part of me?" He blinked. "What do you mean? Do you miss the me who believed everything you said? Who kept her doubts inside and waited for you to show up late again and again? Or do you miss the version of me that walks away now when something doesn't feel right?" His shoulders lowered. "I miss the woman who taught me what love could look like before I knew how to give it." Her throat tightened. "I don't want to break her again," he added. "I don't want to lose her again," she replied. Silence settled. Then she asked, "Do you still love me?" "I do. But this time, I'm willing to wait until that love is safe for you." She looked at him for a long time, then stood. "I'm not saying yes. I'm not asking for it." She turned toward the street. "But I'm saying I don't hate the sound of your voice anymore." He smiled. "That's a start." The next day, she sent him a message. "There's a teacher in Fayetteville who wants to start a youth poetry column. Think you can draft a framework by Friday?" He replied, "Already on it." No emojis. No extra lines. But behind the screen, both of them felt something cracking open. Not wide. Just enough for light to come in. Dorian arrived at the Fayetteville school early. The teacher, Ms. Ortega, was already waiting in the library. A compact woman with silver braids and a no-nonsense tone. "You're Imani's strategist?" she asked, as he set down his laptop. "Working with her, yes. She said you're good. We'll see." He smiled. "That's fair." They reviewed her proposal for a youth poetry column, a simple idea, but layered in need. Her students had been writing for months, but had nowhere to showcase their voices. She wanted the shelf-worthy platform to feature their work as a monthly segment. Dorian listened. He asked the right questions. And when Ms. Ortega finished, she said, "You didn't come in here trying to impress anyone. I'm done with that phase." She smirked. "Good." "Imani doesn't like noise." He chuckled. "She told you that?" "No, she didn't have to." By noon, they had a working plan, a title for the column, and a rollout schedule. He texted Imani the update. "It's a green light." Miss Ortega is a force, she replied. Told you. Simple. Sharp. Herself. He stared at the screen for a while, before slipping the phone into his coat pocket and stepping outside into the sun. That evening, he didn't go home. He drove to the bookstore in Somerville, Lether's Reads and Remedies. It was closed, but the lights inside were on. Aunt Lether stood at the counter, rearranging bookmarks. He knocked softly. She squinted through the glass, then opened the door a few inches. "Well, I'll be," she said. "You're either brave or foolish showing up without calling. Probably both." She let him in. "I'm not here for a second chance," he said before she could speak. "I just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" "For raising the kind of woman who could walk away from someone like me." Aunt Lether crossed her arms. "You broke her." "I know. She loved you. I didn't deserve it." "No, you didn't. But people change." He nodded. "I hope so." They stood in silence. Then she pointed to a shelf. "You see those 3 books?" He glanced over. 3 anthologies with the shelf-worthy logo printed proudly on the spine. "Those are hers. She shipped them to me last month." He moved closer, touched the cover. "She's not a story someone else wrote," Aunt Lether said. "She's the author now." He turned back toward the counter. "I don't want to write her story," he said. "I just want to stand in the one she chooses." Lether raised an eyebrow. "That line better not be practiced." He chuckled. "It's not." She finally smiled. Back in Raleigh, Imani was in her kitchen folding laundry when her phone buzzed. A photo of her books on display at the bookstore. "Dorian, went to say thank you. She said she might not cuss me out next time." She stared at the image. That store was her beginning. Seeing her work on those shelves, her words, her imprint, her dream, it reminded her of something she had almost forgotten. She didn't build to prove Dorian wrong. She built to make herself right. And now, somehow, he wasn't trying to attach himself to her success. He was just walking beside it. The following weekend, he joined her and her team for the annual Shelf-Worthy Youth Retreat. Dozens of students from the pilot programs gathered at a local park, sharing food, reciting their work, playing music under open skies. There were no cameras, no press kits, just community. Dorian helped set up chairs, carried water, listened to kids read poems about heartbreak and hope. At one point, a girl named Amina, no older than 14, stood on the grass with shaky hands holding a journal. Her voice was soft, nervous. Imani stepped beside her and held the mic gently. "You can read it as slow as you want," she whispered. Amina nodded and began, "I used to think my silence meant I didn't matter. But now I know silence is where stories live before they're ready to speak." The crowd stilled. "And Dorian?" He looked at Imani, standing there, guiding without overshadowing, present without dominating. She wasn't who he fell for. She was more, and this time he saw it in full. After the event, as the team packed up, he walked toward her. "I have a question," he said. She glanced over. "Ask. If we were just 2 people. No history, no New York, no brunch, just this, right now. Who would I have to be to earn a seat in your life?" She didn't answer immediately. She closed a box, handed it to a volunteer, then finally turned to him. "You'd have to be honest." "I am." "You'd have to be slow." "I'm trying." "You'd have to be okay with not being needed." That made him pause. "I used to think love was about being essential," he said. "And now? I think love is showing up, even when you're not." She nodded. "That's a start." He stepped back, gave her space, and she let him. Not into her heart. Not yet. But into the moment. And that meant more. Have you ever had someone return to your life, not asking for forgiveness, but quietly proving they'd changed? How did you know it was real? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this chapter moved you, like, share, and subscribe for more powerful life and love stories. Your voice matters. Let's talk about second chances. It started with a dinner invitation, not from Imani, from her mother. Imani had mentioned it casually during a Friday call with her aunt. Dorian had happened to stop by her office just before she left for the weekend, dropping off annotated notes for a new mentorship structure. As he placed the folder on her desk, she grabbed her purse and keys. "I'm driving to Florence tomorrow," she said offhandedly. He turned. "South Carolina?" "My mom's place. She's hosting a small dinner, just family. It's been a while." He nodded, lingering. "Will your aunt be there?" "Yeah, probably my cousins too." She didn't say anything else, didn't offer an invite. He didn't expect one, but the next morning, his phone buzzed. "If you're free, come. 3 p.m. Casual. You won't be the only outsider at the table." He stared at the message for a long moment, then packed an overnight bag, pressed a shirt, and drove down. Florence was humid that day, the kind of southern sticky heat that settled in your collar and made the air feel thick. Imani's mother lived in a modest brick home with a wraparound porch and wind chimes on each corner. The screen door creaked when he stepped up to knock. Imani opened it herself. Black tea, loose jeans, hair in a low bun, no makeup. She looked like home. "You came," she said, holding the door. "You invited me." "No, I gave you the option." He smiled. "Same thing." She shook her head, but didn't hide the small tug of her lips as she stepped aside. Inside, the house smelled like baked chicken, roasted vegetables, and vanilla. Laughter carried from the kitchen. Jazz played faintly in the background. Her mother, tall, straight-backed and direct, greeted him with a nod. "So, you're the one who made my daughter stop writing poetry for 2 years." Dorian stood taller. "Yes, ma'am. And now?" Trying to make sure she never stops again. Her mother didn't smile, but she didn't dismiss him either. "That's a better answer than I expected." Dinner was loud. Cousins cracked jokes. Kids ran through the living room. The table was full of soul food, iced tea, and old family stories. Dorian didn't dominate the conversation. He listened. When someone asked what he did now, he simply said, "I'm learning how to help without taking over." A cousin raised a brow. "You in therapy?" "Every Thursday," he replied without flinching. That earned a few nods. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low, Imani sat with him on the porch swing. Bare feet, a cold glass of tea in hand. The wind chimes danced in rhythm with the breeze. "You handled them well," she said. "I was sweating the whole time. You didn't show it." He turned toward her. "I meant what I said. About helping without taking over, I know. Also, about therapy." She looked over, curious. 3 months now," he said. "At first, I went because I felt like I had no idea who I was without my company. And now? Now I go because I want to know who I am when no one's watching." She nodded slowly. "That's important. It's hard. Good. That means it's real." He took a sip of his tea. "I talk about you in therapy." She didn't look at him, but her grip on the glass tightened just slightly. He continued, "I don't talk about us like a failure. I talk about you like a compass. I didn't know which way was right until you left. Don't put me on a pedestal. I'm not. But I'd be stupid not to admit I broke something worth keeping." They sat in silence for a while. Then she said, "You haven't tried to kiss me." He turned to her gently. "Would it ruin what we're rebuilding if I did?" "No," she whispered. "But it would speed up something I'm still trying to walk through." He nodded. "I'll wait." She looked at him now, really looked, and saw it. Not the polished charm, not the boardroom posture, just a man. Present, quiet, still. Later, when he stood to leave, she walked him to his car. As he opened the driver's door, she touched his wrist. Not to stop him, just to hold something. For 1 second, he turned. "Drive safe," she said. "I always do when I leave your house." This time she smiled, and it stayed. The next few weeks moved quietly. No declarations, no backslides. Dorian returned to his normal rhythm, mentoring, consulting, showing up at shelf-worthy meetings. sending Imani weekly notes about district feedback and data from the writer's table pilot. He didn't linger in her office, didn't over-text, didn't ask for dinner. He simply delivered value, showed up, then left. And that changed more than any apology ever could. One Friday afternoon, Imani stepped into the break room at the office and saw a box on the table addressed to her. Inside, 10 printed copies of the youth poetry column from Fayetteville, complete with bios, artwork, and a personal letter from Ms. Ortega. At the bottom of the box, a card. No flowers. No name on the front. Inside it read, "This is what your silence made possible. Not by waiting, but by walking away until someone learned to follow differently. D." She sat in the chair beside the table and didn't move for 10 minutes. She didn't cry, but she did feel something peel open, something she'd kept closed for far too long. That weekend, she sent him a calendar invite. Sunday, 6:30 p.m. location, my place subject, dinner note, bring your own piece. I'm already full of mine. He arrived at 6/2008. Knocked once. No flowers. Just him. She opened the door barefoot, wearing a soft wine-colored knit dress. Hair down, calm in her eyes. Dinner was simple. Roasted vegetables, lemon rice, and sautéed salmon. They ate mostly in silence. Not awkward. Settled. When they finished, he offered to wash dishes. She let him. As he rinsed the final plate, she leaned against the doorway. I used to cook for you and wait to be thanked. He dried his hands. I remember. I don't wait anymore. He nodded. Good. You shouldn't. She stepped forward. Not quickly, not dramatically, just close enough that he could hear her breathing. I'm not inviting you back into the same position, she said, because that role is gone. That version of me is retired. I'm not asking for what I lost, he said. I'm here for what's possible. She studied him, then asked, do you still love me? He didn't hesitate. Yes. Why? Because I see you. All of you. Not just the version I once wanted you to be. She nodded slowly. Then sit down. He followed her into the living room. They sat side by side on the couch, her legs tucked under her, his posture open but relaxed. She turned toward him. I'm still healing. I'll match your pace. I have triggers. I'll learn your map. I'm not sure where this ends. I'm not here for the ending. I'm here for every part. She breathed in, slow, deep, then placed her hand over his. No kiss, no flash, just warmth and choice. Later that night, he stood at her front door, coat in hand. Want me to stay? He asked gently. She looked up. Not yet. He nodded. I'll be here when you're ready. And as he walked down the hallway, she didn't feel tension. She felt trust. For the first time, the man who once made her feel small had shown her what it meant to love without needing control. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm that neither of them defined. Dorian didn't move in. He didn't even stay over. But every Saturday morning, without fail, he knocked on Imani's door at 8:30 a.m. with 2 cups of coffee, one black, one with oat milk, and a shot of hazelnut. Hers. They didn't talk about what it meant. They just sat on her couch and reviewed projects, shared book recommendations, or watched whatever documentary she had queued up. Some days, they said little. Other days, they debated like they used to, with ideas, not egos. It wasn't romantic yet, but it was real. And it was steady, which, for Imani, mattered more. One morning, as they sat side by side scrolling through youth submissions, for the new writing program, Dorian handed her a printed poem. She read it quietly. It was a short piece, honest, painful. A student describing what it felt like to be labeled lazy because their parents worked night shifts and they often came to school hungry and late. When she looked up, her throat tight, he said, "We need to do more than just publish them." She nodded. Let's build something more sustainable. Like a writer's circle? No. Bigger. She sat forward, energy stirring. What if we create a paid fellowship for high school students? Monthly stipend, weekly mentorship, publication pipeline. Applications open every semester, he added. No GPA requirement, just raw voice. Exactly. They looked at each other, eyes locked. It was more than a good idea. It was alignment. This was what always worked between them. The building. When it wasn't about proving anything, they were magic. That same week, Imani's team held a planning retreat at a small lodge 2 hours outside the city. She invited Dorian, not as a guest, but as a facilitator. He prepared a workshop on authentic impact strategy. Nothing flashy. No tech slides. Just story-driven models and open Q&A. He wore jeans and a button-up, sleeves rolled, voice calm. Afterward, one of the interns, a bold, brilliant young woman named Nessa, came up to Imani. "Okay, I don't know what your situation is with that man," she said, arms crossed, "but the way he looked at you during your vision session, that's not business." Imani didn't react, just smiled faintly and walked away. Because sometimes silence says more than certainty. That night, around the fire pit, Imani stepped away to take a call from her mom. When she returned, she noticed her team laughing about something, and Dorian quietly walking to the far side of the patio near the trees. She followed. He stood with his hands in his pockets, looking up at the sky. "Need air?" she asked. "Just thinking." She stood beside him. "I still forget how to breathe sometimes when I'm not needed," he said softly. She glanced over. "You're needed. I mean needed with intention, not with obligation." She nodded. "You're not here because I depend on you." He turned toward her. "You're here because you chose me again," she said. "And that choice is loud, even when we don't say it." He looked at her, not as a man seeking approval, but as someone grateful to be seen again. They didn't touch, but they stood close. And that night, she didn't ask him to stay. But when he left, she texted, "I sleep better when I know you're somewhere building peace." He replied, "That's all I'm building now." They didn't kiss, but they came close. It happened the night before Shelfworthy's Youth Fellowship officially launched, a program born from scratch, built with every scrap of trust, teamwork, and late-night planning sessions they had pieced together over the last few months. The final promotional video had been edited. The website landing page was live. The press release scheduled. Imani stood in her office late, staring at the banner photo. 5 students, smiling, real, bold. A tagline below, "Your voice was never too loud. They just didn't listen." She closed her laptop and looked over at Dorian, who was still writing notes on the whiteboard about next quarter's rollout. "Do you ever stop working?" she asked. He turned, pen in hand, tired but lit up. "Do you?" She smirked. "Touché." He wiped the board clean and set the marker down. They stood in silence for a moment. She leaned back against the desk. He leaned next to her, arms folded. "It feels good," she said. "Not just the win, but how we got here." "You led," he replied. "You followed," she said. "That mattered more." He glanced over, lips parted like he wanted to say something, but he didn't. She noticed. "Say it." "I wanted to kiss you tonight," he said plainly. "But I wasn't sure if it would undo the safety we've built." She looked at him, not startled, not alarmed, just still. "You're not wrong to want that. But I don't want to lose clarity." He nodded. "I've spent so much of my life being wanted," she continued, "but rarely have I felt safe in that want. I get that. And I don't want our kiss, if or when it happens, to be something I need to question later. You won't." She turned fully toward him. "That confidence. That's what used to scare me. I know, but it's not ego anymore. It's intention." She looked at his face. Steady, unhurried. She stepped closer, not for drama, not for a test, but to see if the space between them had changed. It had. Still magnetic, but now peaceful, She stood close enough to feel his breath, then leaned her forehead lightly against his chest. He didn't move, didn't rush. He just placed his hand lightly on her back and held still. No pressure, no need to escalate. Just warmth and a quiet promise, I'll never push again. That weekend, the fellowship launch drew praise across the state. Local papers ran the story. Education blogs shared the videos. The Department of Public Instruction requested a presentation, but Imani, she stayed quiet. Let her team take the spotlight. Let the students speak. And on Sunday night, when her inbox had 47 unread emails, she turned off her phone and sat on the couch with a bowl of fruit and a blanket. Then came a knock. She opened the door to find Dorian standing there with 2 tubs of frozen yogurt, 2 spoons, and a look that said, I know you didn't eat dinner. She stepped aside without a word. They sat on the couch, sharing bites in silence. He didn't talk about the press, didn't recap numbers. He just watched a nature documentary with her and let her rest her leg against his thigh. Midway through the second episode, she spoke. You showed up. I told you I would. I know, she whispered. I just didn't know it would feel this easy. He set the container down. It's only easy because we stopped performing. She nodded, turning toward him. And then, slowly, without pressure, she leaned forward and placed her lips gently against his. Not a deep kiss, not a rushed one, just enough to say, I'm not afraid anymore. When she pulled back, she didn't move away. He didn't speak. He just touched her cheek and let the moment hold. It wasn't a restart. It was a new beginning, built with hands that no longer clenched and hearts that no longer needed to win. Imani had never liked the spotlight. Not in a stage fright kind of way. She could command a room with grace and clarity when needed. But she never craved applause. Her work had always spoken louder than her name. But this time, the spotlight found her. Shelfworthy's Youth Fellowship Initiative was picked up by a national education magazine. Then came a podcast interview. Then a feature request from a major black-owned business publication with over 4 million monthly readers. Her team was ecstatic. Her calendar exploded, and the world started asking questions, not just about the work, but about the woman behind it. Do you have a partner? How do you balance relationships with leadership? What's your support system like? Imani kept her answers measured. My team is strong. My family is tight. I've learned how to build peace for myself. But behind every answer, Dorian's name hovered like unspoken punctuation, not because she was hiding him, but because she hadn't figured out how to name what they were yet, and the world didn't get to name it first. Meanwhile, Dorian remained steady. He didn't ask to be included in the coverage, didn't post behind-the-scenes shots, didn't hint at his involvement. He knew this moment was hers, and that meant more than being visible. It meant being respectful. He sent her a short message after the article went live. Proud isn't big enough a word, but it'll do for now. She read it while sitting alone in her car after a shoot for the magazine's cover story. The photographer had asked her to smile, like someone who finally made it. She smiled then. But this time, reading his words, the smile was different. It wasn't proud. It was full. Later that week, Imani was invited to a fundraising gala for a national literary education foundation. Her name was on the guest list. First name, last name, full company bio attached. Dorian was not invited. Not because they excluded him, but because he wasn't listed as staff. And he didn't ask to come. But on the day of the event, she sent him a message anyway. If you're free tonight, I could use someone in my corner. Strictly background energy, black suit, quiet strength. You in? He replied within 60 seconds, pressed and ready. The gala was held at a historic museum downtown. Gold banners, champagne towers. Everyone in tailored dresses and perfectly cut tuxedos. Imani wore a one-shoulder floor-length gown in deep emerald, elegant, unfussy. Her hair was in a braided updo. Her earrings were small. Her confidence, large. When Dorian arrived, he didn't approach her right away. He circled the room slowly, made quiet conversation, stayed visible but not attached. She noticed and appreciated it. But when a board member from a large foundation started asking about Shelfworthy's next funding round, and subtly suggested they bring on a more experienced executive partner, she excused herself with a tight smile and made a beeline for him. He turned when he saw her coming. "Smile," she said under her breath. "You're my emotional PR rep tonight." He grinned. "Need me to step in?" "No," she said. "I just needed to know I had backup." Quiet backup. He nodded. "Always." She stood beside him for a few minutes after that, not speaking, just being. And when she returned to the room, she walked taller. Not because of him, but because with him, she didn't shrink. That night in the car, she turned to him before they pulled away from the venue. "You made it easy tonight." "Good. I need that. With everything coming, I need someone who can be calm in the room without taking the light. I'm not trying to shine anymore. I'm just trying to last." She studied him. "I've had men offer diamonds and dinners to be seen beside me," she said, "but they couldn't handle my silence or my leadership. I want to be the man who honors your peace," he replied, "not interrupt it." She exhaled slowly. "I don't want to hide you anymore." He turned toward her. "I wasn't hiding," he said. "I was building trust. And you did." He didn't speak. He didn't need to, because the space between them had already answered. The following Monday morning, Shelfworthy's headquarters buzzed with energy. The fellowship had officially surpassed its first quarter goal. Partner schools were requesting expanded support. A national literacy network requested to license Shelfworthy's student-led mentorship curriculum. But for once, Imani wasn't in the war room. She was in the content lounge, sipping ginger tea while reviewing the latest layout of a new internal feature, the faces behind the work. The article would highlight 10 team members responsible for program success. Her staff had created it as a way to celebrate people beyond the founder. Imani had final approval. Halfway down the page, she paused. There was a photo of Dorian. He was at a school in Charlotte, seated beside a student, pointing to a paper. Nothing posed, just presence. The caption read, "Dorian Blake, Strategic Consultant, the Writer's Table." She looked at it for a long time, then clicked into the layout and added one sentence under his bio. "Because some people don't need the spotlight to light the way." She hit approve. No fear, no second thoughts. Later that afternoon, she walked into the main room just as the content team was presenting the article on the large screen. There was light applause. Someone whispered, "He finally made it on the site." Imani heard it and smiled. That evening, as the team wrapped up, Dorian stopped by her office. "I saw the layout," he said. "You approve?" I was surprised. She leaned back in her chair. "You earned it." He nodded. "Thank you. You're part of this," she said. "I won't pretend you're not, but I also won't make you responsible for saving what we built." "I don't want credit," he replied, "but I'll never deny I care about this. About us." She stood and walked around the desk until they were face to face. "Do you know how rare this is?" she asked. "What?" "Two people unlearning the worst of themselves and not blaming each other for the versions they used to be." He nodded slowly. She placed her hand on his chest. "You don't owe me a future, but if you want to build one with me, we start from this point forward." No past, no performance, no timeline, no pressure, just honesty. His hand found hers, warm and steady. "I'm here," he said. "I know," she replied. And this time, when they kissed, it wasn't a question. It was an answer, a new beginning, grounded in what they built, not what they lost. 3 months later, spring settled over Raleigh. The city bloomed in soft greens and pinks. Students laughed in the parks. Cafes extended their patios. And Shelfworthy headquarters buzzed with the kind of energy that only came from something real working. The Writers' Table had officially expanded into 12 schools. The Youth Fellowship had over 200 applications. And Imani? She smiled more. Not performative smiles. Not the kind for photos or press, but quiet, satisfied ones. The kind that slipped out when she was editing a student. story, or watching a high school junior pitch a short film idea over Zoom. And somewhere between the business meetings and mentorship calls, Dorian found his rhythm. He wasn't beside her every second, but he showed up where it counted. He handled school relations, coordinated local partnerships, mentored 2 rising strategy interns, and quietly established a $25,000 emergency fund for the students through a foundation he refused to name after himself. He didn't need applause. He had purpose. One morning, Imani stood in her apartment kitchen pouring almond milk into her tea when her phone buzzed. "Dorian, I need you for something this weekend. Sunday, 4 p.m. Dress like you're not working." She replied, "So, pajamas and head wrap?" He replied, "Business casual soft. Trust me." Sunday came. He picked her up right on time. No explanation, just a smile and a calm. "You'll like this." He drove them 20 minutes outside the city, past the suburbs, past the new construction, toward a quiet stretch of land with a small farmhouse, a large open field, and a wooden sign that read, "The Voice Garden." She looked over at him. "What is this?" "You'll see." He led her through a small gate and into the field. Rows of wooden stakes lined the grass, each with a laminated paper attached. Poems, quotes, student submissions, handwritten thank you letters. "It's a literacy park," he said, "funded by one of our donors. I asked them to dedicate it to the stories that would have been lost if you hadn't created shelf-worthy." She walked quietly between the rows. Some signs were crooked. Some had smudges. All of them had soul. At the center was a small bench made of reclaimed wood. She sat. He joined her. "I didn't bring you here to make a speech," he said. "I just wanted you to sit and know that your work lives outside of headlines." She didn't speak. She looked around, touched one of the signs, closed her eyes, and breathed. "This is more than I expected," she finally said. "It's less than you deserve," he replied. She turned toward him, eyes softer than they had been in weeks. "This feels like home." He took her hand. "Then let's build from here." They didn't say "I love you" that day. They didn't make big promises. They didn't plan a wedding or post a photo. But when they left, they held hands in the car the entire drive back. Windows cracked, sunlight pouring in, and silence saying everything. A few weeks after the park visit, Shelfworthy hosted its first full fellowship gathering at a downtown auditorium. All the selected students, 40 in total, traveled in from cities across the state. Some brought parents, others brought notebooks, nerves, and hope. Imani stood backstage, watching from the side curtain as the students rehearsed their speeches, poetry, and presentations. Dorian stood just a few feet behind her, reviewing the run of show. He tapped her shoulder. "You ready?" She looked at the crowd, at the banner that read, "Stories that Belong," then turned to him. "I've never been more ready." Her speech wasn't long. She didn't use slides. She didn't list numbers. She just told them the truth. "I was once told that because I didn't have a job title, I wasn't enough, that my value was tied to where I worked, who I worked for, or how loud I was about what I wanted. But I want you to know, your value was never up for debate. And today, we honor that." The applause wasn't wild. It was grounded, respectful, real. After the final session ended, she and Dorian walked the long hallway out to the parking deck. He carried her laptop bag. She didn't offer to take it. She liked how that small moment felt, like being cared for without being weakened. Outside, the sky had shifted to golden haze. He opened her door. Before she got in, she turned. "We never planned this," she said. "I know, but I'm glad we didn't." He smiled. "Me too." She leaned against the frame. "I spent so long thinking love had to look like a fairy tale, surprise trips, candlelit dinners, grand gestures. But it turns out, love is quieter than I expected. It's steadier too, he said, like a hand that shows up even when you don't ask for it. She reached up, touched his face. Thank you for learning me, not saving me. He kissed her then. Not rushed, not intense, just deep enough to say, I'm not going anywhere. 6 months later. Their relationship had rhythm, not perfect, not Instagram-worthy, but consistent. He still lived in his own place. She still ran her company with fire. They had their own circles, separate routines. But every Sunday night, without fail, they met. Sometimes for dinner, sometimes for silence. Sometimes just to lay near each other on the couch with a blanket and no words. And every now and then she would whisper, I'm glad you didn't give up when I walked away. And every time he would reply, I had to lose you to find myself. But I found my way back. For good. Have you ever walked away from someone, only to have them return better, not bitter? What changed? What made you say yes again? Or never look back? Drop your story in the comments. And if this story hit home, like, share, and subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories. We tell the stories that feel like yours.